Welcome to Dr. Jester Rants, and I'm gonna rant about, well, more retarded bull fucking shit. So, here we go. From Gizmodo. We come from the future. Well, if you do come from the future, let me put it this way. After reading what he wrote, I don't want to be part of that future. Anyway, let's go. Dungeons and Dragons and Novels, revisiting Gary Gygax's Saga of Old Town. Let's go. Because what the moron wrote here, it's very retarded. But let's go. First, Gary Gygax created Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, he'll be pretty much flipping over his grave if he could, if he saw the amount of shit that he has become. Anyway, then he created the fantasy world of Oz and its greatest city, Greyhawk. Then he set his mind to writing a D&D novel set in Greyhawk, The Tale of Gord, a young street urchin who rises from poverty and imprisonment to become one of the greatest thieves on the planet. And the writing of Greyhawk, Saga of Old City, Gary Gygax created something quite dreadful. Oh my! He's setting up the environment, the story, the background. It's going to be dreadful. Whee! Well, you're going to see soon that it's not quite as he says. But let me just say the art in here is amazing. I miss this type of art. I miss this type of depth or things like that in a game or in a book cover or things like this. I miss this. You look at it, you can see the adventure, the story, the story that the character is going to face, or the history of the world that it's created. And today it's mostly kind of a two-dimensional bullshit, kind of like what V has been saying quite of late. Kind of like the Middle Ages art, that it's so two-dimensional and crappy. It's pretty much the same thing that is becoming. Who knew that the Control Left would become exactly the people that they admonished a couple of years ago? Anyway, first things first, we need to separate Gygax from the role-playing game pioneer and Gygax the novelist. Why? One can be the creator of the most popular RPG ever and the author of a very bad book. Based on what I read here, pressing X to doubt. On one, the creator of the bad book, the two are not mutually exclusive, and it's definitely worth noting that in 1985 Saga of Old City, Gygax first ever novel, although of course he wrote a million D&D adventure modules before creating Gord, the Rogue. But that doesn't justify all the pleasantness he feels on virtually every page of his book. I'm racking my brain trying to think of anything positive to say about this novel, and all I've got is that it's not the worst technically written book I've reviewed for Dungeons and Dragons and Novels. Well, there are a few bad books. I think mostly the new ones coming out, in which they insert a lot of real-world politics or crappy, nonsensical bullshit, is one of the worst books that one could possibly read. Anyway, everything else is the pets. The first line of dialogue is shit-eater. Gord appears himself on page 13, the first of 5 female characters, only of whom has more than a dozen lines of dialogue. The first of... I'm starting to see a pattern here. Mostly by the guy who wrote this article, is described as having a seasoned strumpet by the age of 13. Right? Gygax also revels in the misery he can inflict upon Gord. He starts in the city of Greyhawk as a young abused orphan who's grateful to be caught stealing, thrown into a stinking prison and forced to hard labor because it gives him a little food semi-regularly. Well, let me put it this way, I live in a goddamn fucking shithole of a country. Some people actually do commit crimes here so they can go to prison, yes, to get not only food, but shelter, and they pay wages to his family, because he's in prison. Yes, you think this is beyond reasonable that it doesn't happen in the real world? Oh, you privileged little shit of an author of this article. Ah, Gizmodo writers, you people have not lived, have you? Maybe you should leave that beautiful apartment or those 8x8 boxes you live in New York and go experience the world outside of your gated community or something like that. Maybe you should do that, but he won't. It will destroy his narrative, and he needs to protect his narrative. Eventually, he is brought into the Beggar's Guild to be a thief, which is weird because there's also definitely a Thieves Guild, the D&D staple. What? But he learns his trade and eventually sets out on a series of adventures throughout the realm of Earth. Actually, a series of adventures might be an euphemism for a series of home D&D game sessions. So what? I see no reason or anything that is wrong with this. There's no overarching plot in the novel whatever. Gord has no emotional growth. The adventures are utterly unconnected from each other, and even the longest only lasts 6 of the book's 33 chapters. Wait, no emotional growth? Well, from what I've seen here, he also had quite a bit of a growth, because, as you said so yourself in here, he was an abused orphan, grateful to be caught, and then eventually he went to a beggar's guild to be a thief. That shows emotional growth. Maybe he's thinking emotional growth like Gary Stu. No, not Gary. I forgot the male version of Mary Sue or Mary Sue or something like this. Maybe he's not used to actual character growth, and he thinks that a character growth is not character growth. So far, I'm interested in this book. Seems interesting. What Saga of the Old City is, besides a book that spends only 18% of its pages inside Greyhawk's Old City district, is a transcript of a player-made Dungeons & Dragons character leveling up. We've talked about how it's kind of fun when you can get a peek at the gears of the D&D mechanic inside the narrative, but without a narrative, it goes all the way down. Reading the book is like reading a transcript of a bunch of very standard, very gaming sessions. Gord's attacked by bandits? Yeah, that happens. I'm pretty sure if you go to a series of the one that you cannot be mentioned protests, you get attacked too, but you don't. Anyway, Gord sails on a ship that is attacked by Sea Serpent. Gord decides to steal treasure from a thieves guild somewhere. God must rescue a personality-less damsel in distress and escape a dungeon. Remember, these people actually think Mary Sue's have personalities. These people are the actual people who actually think that Mare Ray, from Ray from Star Wars, is an actual good character. That it had growth and things like that, when in fact she was pretty much overpowered little damsel, princess or whatever from the get-go. Gord is attacked by more bandits. Gord decides to fight in a battle. Gord fights a demon for a magic artifact, and at the end of each adventure there's an increasingly difficult challenge for him to face, and an increasing amount of treasure that he receives for his troubles. I'm starting to like this book. It's like Gygax, roll up a Gord on a character sheet, figure out a few scenarios to place him in, and then meticulously count the experience points at regular. I think there is a mosquito flying right now. I just saw flying one over here. If you suck my blood, I'm going to fucking kill you, you little shit. It's like I got roll up gun bandits, placing them meticulously bandits what treasure to receive, defeating them. In fact, at the end of the book, Gygax literally reveals that what Gord's D&D stats were during the first and final chapters. So, look at this. Oh man, I don't think you're... let me put it this way, I don't think you're worth, or even you should be owning a copy of that book like this. Greyhawk Adventures, Saga of Old City. I don't think you should. I don't think I don't think you deserve this book. Anyway, somehow the vast majority of other characters in the book have even less personality than a completed character sheet. I could only describe them as either their job or their character classes. Thief, Ranger, Druid. I feel I could add an adjective too, such as evil, big master, and the amiable warrior jerk. Here is the ultimate example of how poorly these characters are written. Okay? Right? Convince me. At one point, Gord... No, let me... No. At one point, Gord is traveling with a couple of companions he likes, and they have a conversation where each of them discovered facts about the other. We have never read a line of dialogue, nor find out what these facts are. Sadly, the only two characters that stick out are Garen, solely because he is one of Gord's fellow thieves, who ends up being a spy later in the book, and the aforementioned damsel in distress. And Evelyn, because she's in 4 full chapters, she's such a one-dimensional stereotype. She's basically an object, another item for Gord to steal. Whose treasure is the sex she rewards him at the end of the adventure for rescuing her. Okay, this seems quite interesting. I'm definitely interested in the book now. Why do you have an issue with this? Anyway, let's go. It's all terrible, but it might be mitigated if God weren't so deeply unlikable. He's greedy, petty, and vindictive. Vindictive? I think you mean vindictive, but... I thinks of 4 of the book's 5 female characters solely in sexual terms. The 5th escapes his loss solely because she wants to have sex with someone else. And when he joins a Romani troupe, of course negatively stereotyped in the story as he wins one woman after a duel but quickly decides she's a nag and a bitch. Okay, I can see why you get triggered because he called the woman a bitch, so... Okay, what's the problem in that? I'm pretty sure you call anyone who disagrees with your narrative an incel, but fine. The most heinous example is when he returns the noble Evelyn to her home and he's thrown into prison. He pretty quickly assumes she's abandoned him and hates her, but when he's freed and realizes Evelyn was sent away to another nobleman because she was trapped in an arranged marriage. Even though she sends him a note wishing she could have stayed with him, Gord calls her a liar and a bitch. Gord sucks. I hate Gord. No, because she could have told him from the beginning that she was in an arranged marriage. So, I don't see what's the problem. Anyway, Gygax is clearly trying to write a Robert E. Howard style, Conan the Barbarian type fantasy of warriors, sorcery, monsters, and sexy women, but he only succeeds on the most technical levels. Howard's characters had personality and depth, and his stories had an imagination that reached far beyond the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons Player's Guide. If I had to play in D&D games like this, I'll have quit by chapter 5. Well, let me put it this way, you wouldn't even be welcome on my Dungeons & Dragons group, or in quite a few of other Dungeons & Dragons players, because you are one of those types of people who actually gets in, and then you get so triggered that you want to change everything to fit your desires and narratives, without respecting the desires of the other players. That's why. Gatekeeping essential. Anyway, I feel very weird about hating a novel written by the father of Dungeons & Dragons, but there is nothing fantastic about the fantasy in Saga of Old City. It's just deeply unpleasant. Why? So while I might give the technical writing a 4 on 1d20, is more competent at scene and action descriptions than R.A. Salvatore in The Crystal Shard. At least Salvatore's characters were distinct and memorable, but penalty of -2 along with a -3 for its outright misogyny. What misogyny? I didn't even see a single misogyny in the entire... Do you realize that Dungeons & Dragons is actually based in the Middle Ages and things like that? or even earlier, depending on what type of barbarism you want to experience in Dungeons and Dragons? Do you realize how misogynistic those societies were back in those days? Or are you so goddamn fucking retarded that you do not know history? Like I said in the beginning, in which you do not understand why the person chose to go to jail. You really need to get out more, fucking Gizmodo writer. Anyway, in the end, that leaves Saga Vault City with a -1, technically if not a critical miss, but still an utter failure. Somehow there's 6 more novels Gygax scored series, which seems utterly impossible given that he defeats a full-on demon at the end of Saga Old City, has multiple magical weapons and items, and seems, based on the stats Gygax gives, for him to be at least 16th level. I don't know where he can possibly go from here, I just know I have no desire to find out. Yeah, thank goodness these books weren't written for people like you. As you can see, they were written for people like me and others, which eventually led to multiple books being made, because after all, people like me buy these things because they are good, we like it. And people like you, who are a minority, don't quite buy those books. And we can see why, when people pander to your woke shenanigans, well, they tend to go broke. And let me put it into perspective to something more common. If you're playing a Dungeons and Dragons game, or, well, quite frankly, any RPG in gaming, for instance, PC gaming. Let's take that as an example. When there's a character moving from one place to another, Baldur's Gate, for instance. Your stats are kind of reset, or something like that. Or, for instance, something bad happens to you and you lose part of your items, or most of your items, or your stats, your character is still there, but your level goes down, and things like that. Shit like this happens, it's part of the story, and I'm pretty sure the next books on the Gourd series is pretty much the same thing. I don't see any issue, but apparently you have a problem in understanding that, don't you? Let's see, Greyhawk. Greyhawk, a beautiful, wondrous city, a cruel city, a hard, pitiless city for a young orphan boy, with no money and no friends, but plenty of enemies. Enter the old city of Greyhawk, that marvelous place where dreams and nightmares come true. Travel through the world of Oath along with Gord, the boy who becomes a man as he fights for his survival in a world of mysterious wizards, fearsome monsters, dwarves, and beautiful women. For Oath is a world where a man's eyes always watch the shadows, and a man's hand is always on the hilt of his dagger. Here, at last, is adventure enough to last a lifetime. Perhaps a very short lifetime. I'm looking forward to it. Holy shit, the inflation was quite bad. 225. Holy shit. That's actually kind of cheap. Anyway, let's see. Assorted nuisance. Oh, consider this the trigger warning for just about everything. I have only partially described a horrible misogyny. Don't read this book. Oh. I also found the places, names, rules, and politics in book to be completely unmemorable and unfathomable. But I was never familiar with Greyhawk in the slightest, so I'm going to take the responsibility for that. The novel has more than enough faults. There is a town called Stoink. That one did stick in my mind. Oh my god, I'm afraid. Oh, look at me shaking. Oh, I'm having PTSD from reading this book. Oh, it's final stats at the end of the novel for the record. Yeah. At one point, a pack of wolf whales shows up. Oh, I thought it was a mind-boggling typo, but it turns out they were creatures called wolf whales. In early advanced Dungeons and Dragons, they were wolves who could turn werewolves instead of humans. Oh my god, I'm having PTSD. If Saga Vault City was better, we might have found this amusing. If for some reason, if you're kidnapped by a psychopath who somehow forces you to read Saga Vault City or Spellfire, so style, choose Spellfire every time, at least at some point, it's entertainingly awful. Despite my distaste for the pros, infinite thanks to Christopher M for sending it to my review. I had to actually write this, but I hate the guy. I'm writing multiple spells against him for doing this. Next up, I'm fleeing back to the forgotten realms of Shadowdale. My scorched engine. Sorry, it's so long since the last DN. Since I've been helping out IO9 full time. I'm not getting paid. My bed's on maternity leave. I've been too busy for extracurricular activities. I should be back on track shortly. I'll read this book. It gave me PTSD. Well, that summarizes the goddamn fucking moron in this fucking shit. Holy moly, this guy is a moron. No wonder he didn't like this book, and no wonder the people like him wants to change Dungeons and Dragons to fit his world. Well, we fell in love to the original Gygax vision, the original stuff, and now they are changing it to unrecognizable levels. No wonder. No wonder imbecilic morons keep on trying to peddle the wheelchair shenanigans on Dungeons and Dragons. What the fuck? Imagine an evil lich or an evil monster or an evil demon who is controlling a massive dungeon. Oh my god. There's a group of adventurers coming to my dungeon. Hey, minion over there, minion, random minion over there. Make it ramp accessible, make it disabled accessible. Make it better for them. For all the adventurers who are using wheelchair to be accessible in my dungeon. But make it a throne. At the end, only have a stair, so they never reach me. Jesus Christ, these people are ruining Dungeons and Dragons because of imbeciles like the guy who wrote this article. Thank goodness we will always have the original material, and anything prior to the latest edition from Dungeons and Dragons. Oh god, these people have ruined everything. Anyway, if you like this type of content, stay right here on goddamn fucking YouTube. Fuck you, YouTube.com/Dr. Jester. If you like more spicy content, unique and exclusive, head to BitChute.com/Dr. Jester or Minds.com/Dr. Jester for that spicy and unique content. It even has its own fucking thumbnail. Yes. Production values going up. See. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a very good night. Especially if you're going to enjoy some good novels. Oh, Gygax, but good characters. Anyway, good fucking night.